Hey, legal rebels. Thanks for tuning in to LawDroid Manifesto, a rallying cry for legal innovation. I'm Tom Martin, and today we're going to talk about AI in the law, the challenge for our generation, where when we come back, I'm going to share with you an old story that sheds some light on our current moment. An old story about the Sultan and Orban. And why the heck am I talking about that? It just seems to be particularly relevant to what's going on right now. It was a time back in the 15th century when it was an existing technology, but it was so much better than it had been previously that it just made a quantum leap difference in how you approach the world. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about uh, back then, there still was a remnant of the Eastern Roman Empire in Constantinople. And the Sultan, Mehmed, he had this torturous history with his father where he actually took over the throne when he was 12. And then his dad kind of clawed that back from him and took it away, and then allowed him to ascend to the throne again when he was 19. And as you can imagine, if you put yourself in his shoes, like really felt that he had something to prove to his dad and to people that he could stand on his own and he could have his own achievements. Um, and so when he took over, he wanted to make his own imprint on the world. And so it just coincided with the same time there was this master iron forger named Orban. He was Hungarian, and he was not only good at what he does, but he was an enterprising guy. He was an entrepreneur, and he and his son, they were lucky enough to get an audience. Not sure how they pulled that off, but they got an audience with Mehmed, and they're like, "Hey, Mehmed, we know you have wanted to make this your major achievement, and we know that generations of sultans before you have wanted to conquer Constantinople." And just a little background: the problem with them trying to do that and accomplishing it is that the walls of Constantinople had stood for 1,000 years, had withstood sieges, assaults, you name it. The Ottoman Empire had thrown everything at it, and the walls were standing as this impregnable barrier between the Ottoman Empire and this last remaining vestige of the Roman Empire. And why? Because they're so thick. They also had like multiple, moats, and part of it was protected by the sea. It was just a very protected position that Constantinople was. And if you've ever looked at the map, you could see that Constantinople is geographically strategic too, and in the power that it could project from that position to the rest of the world. So it was definitely a prime location to extend one's empire. And so that was the reason that Mehmed was after it, as well as his own personal reasons. And so Orban gets this audience with Mehmed and is like, "Hey, I can create this super weapon for you, the super gun that no one has achieved before, and we can project these gigantic cannonballs against Constantinople that they're so large." I think the way you put it was that they can take down the walls of Babylon. Mehmed was pretty impressed. Orban said, well, Mehmed, to his credit, was like, "Why are you talking to me? You're Hungarian, you're Christian, so why aren't you trying to sell this to um, you know, the Roman Emperor?" And Orban basically was like, he's not willing to pay my price. I'm here to be an enterprising businessman, and he just couldn't meet my price. And Mehmed said pretty much, "Look, if you could do this for me, I'm willing to pay you 4 times what you want." And with that, Orban was overjoyed, as was his son. But the catch was that Mehmed needed it done very quickly. So that's a tale old as time for other vendors and entrepreneurs out there, that a client sometimes wants something under the gun. And so then he takes it to task and he builds this cannon, and the rest, as they say, is history. The walls of Constantinople fell, and Mehmed became known as Mehmed the Conqueror. So why on earth am I telling you this story about the fall of Constantinople? Well, it's because I believe that the practice of law, as it currently stands, is like Constantinople. Um, the practice of law stood for, not in the same form, but it stood for about 2,000 years. Emperor Claudius, legalized advocacy where someone can represent someone else and get paid. So that's, before then, you weren't allowed to get paid for it. But Claudius legalized that. And so essentially it became a profession at that point. And it stood that way for 2,000 years. And it's gotten obviously more and more regulated and professional over time, one would hope, and it has. And so it has this wall, it has this moat, and the moat is UPL, the unlawful practice of law, which is ambiguously defined. And there's, of course, a counterweight to that, which is the First Amendment and free speech, freedom of association, and the ability to, defend oneself. So there's this tension that I believe is going to play out right now between these two competing things. And what's going to force the issue and what's going to explode the walls that currently exist in the practice of law is going to be AI. And we've had tangible evidence of how this is going to play out with ChatGPT, because it's the first time that we've had such a fluent and intelligent interaction with artificial intelligence. My company, LawDroid, was founded 7 years ago now, and that was right when chatbots were becoming popular. And back then, and up until recently, it was mostly choose your own adventure. It was conditional logic, and at best, natural language processing. So similar phrasings and serving up answers based on similar questions, that kind of thing. But what GPT technology, and it's not just OpenAI, there's other players at work here, and obviously this has sparked, ChatGPT has sparked an entire arms race. There's a lot of players in this area, but what's different is that this generative AI has the ability to hold a conversation and to have a fluent one. Now, I'm not naive. There are obviously shortcomings. There's the risk of confabulation, that the system can make up a fact that doesn't exist to try to provide an answer because it wants to please. It's kind of like a different metaphor is that I've heard is it's like a confident teenager in that it wants to be able to answer the question, regardless of how confidently it gets it wrong. And we just saw that recently with Bard. But we don't want to be myopic either. This is just the beginning. It's going to get better and better and better over time. And I truly believe that where we're at now is an inflection point. And it's not one where there's going to be linear AI progress. I believe that it's truly going to be exponential in that it's going to get better and better very quickly. Like Moore's Law, it's going to improve on itself. I've already seen a number of articles in disparate areas of expertise that have been affected by machine learning, and that it's starting to solve problems that are in many different disparate areas, from fusion reactions to modeling proteins to the practice of law. And this is going to be a change that happens very quickly. For me, as Gen X, like I experienced something similar to this when the dot-com boom happened and everything was rethought in terms of the internet. there was a bust, obviously, but it is how we live now. We live through not only our in real life experiences, but online social media. I mean, it's just a common fact of life nowadays. And in the same way, the use of artificial intelligence for everything is going to be a fact of life. And so my company and others are coming into this space. And I truly believe that we're just at the beginning of this. This is not hype. There is a certain element of, puffery going on, but this is going to continue, is what I mean. And an entire, this is giving birth to an entire industry of companies that are going to fine tune, support, make easily accessible the underlying technology so that your imagination is going to be the limit of what you can create using this technology. And of course, that all sounds extremely like optimistic, positive, and there could be a dark side to it as well. But I think that we're cognizant enough and cautious enough, especially as lawyers, to be aware of those issues and to guard against them. Just as a side note, I recently got back from New Orleans, and the reason I was there is I was speaking on a panel called Bots Practicing Law. And it was put on by the Association of Professional Responsibility Lawyers. And, it was a very eager and interested crowd. It's usually rare in my experience that when I'm on a speaking panel that we get many questions. Usually at the end, it's like, do you have any questions? Do you have any questions? Kind of a Bueller, aging myself there, but kind of a Bueller moment. And there were questions throughout. People were engaged. They were not even waiting to the end. They were just jumping into our talk throughout, asking questions. And people are very eager to understand. And there were some misconceptions for sure about the technology and what it can do. But I think everybody was on the same page of wanting to better understand it and knowing that there's going to be a place for this. We just haven't figured it out yet. And so getting back to my post about AI and the law, the challenge for our generation. So that challenge, to be clear, is that we must expand our notion of the practice of law. And how do we expand it? Well, essentially the conceptual change or the conceptual improvement that we need to face as the challenge of our generation is moving from a one-to-one relationship where it's been up until this point, where you have one attorney and one client, to a one-to-many relationship or many-to-many relationship. And the clincher, like the root of the problem, is that we've never done it that way before. And also, how do we do it that way before and continue to safeguard people? So all of the rules of the unlawful practice of law and our ethics rules are written for the one-to-one relationship between an attorney and a client. But how do we enforce the same concerns about doing right by our clients when it's one to many? And there are going to be a great number of companies and entrepreneurs that use this new technology to address the unmet needs of the great majority of the population that can't afford lawyers. And it's unavoidable that that's going to create problems with the existing regulations and ethics of law. So I think, especially based on conversations I've had with state regulators and also professional responsibility lawyers, that there has to be a change. We're just not sure what it is yet. And I think the way that we all learn is unfortunately through the experience of somebody going too far and there being a pushback from that and then trying to come up with rules based on the concrete example of what happened. And so that still needs to play out. But I think that there's going to be a number of opportunities to meet people where they're at with this technology and to improve everyone's ability to access the law. So that's what I believe is the challenge of our generation. And it's going to be a dramatic story to watch. I think that everyone will benefit from it eventually, but there's no clear answers right now. And I know we're all looking for those answers. And the best I could say is that we'll find them together. Thank you so much for watching LawDroid Manifesto, a rallying cry for legal innovation. Every week, I'll be posting a new Substack along with a podcast and video just like this. So please tune in. You won't want to miss it.